you.
Yeah, good job.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Jobtech for Refugees Summit, hosted by NAML and Jobtech Alliance. The Jobtech for Refugees Summit is a 3-day virtual event examining what it actually takes to convert displaced people into sustained work. My name is Lorraine Charles, and I'm the founder and executive director of NAML. This is the second session of the summit. Session 1 examined why trained refugees don't transition into sustained work. This session shifts the lens to the other side of the equation. We hear employers often expressing interest in working with refugees and displaced people. Corporate commitments are made, pilot programs are launched, the language of inclusion is well rehearsed, yet stated commitment often does not translate into sustained hiring, contracting, or meaningful career pathways. The gap between what companies say they value and what their decisions are reveal in practice is one of the least examined dynamics of refugee employment. This session will examine what actually drives and constrains employers in a candid one-to-one conversation. This format is deliberately intimate. 2 fireside conversations between the moderator and one employer at a time, followed by an intervention from a company that has successfully hired refugees. The goal is honesty, not performance. I am pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Geraldine of BrighterMonday, Senior Specialist Strategy at BrighterMonday. In our first fireside chat, we're excited to welcome Jente Rosseel, who's the CEO of Elew. And in our second fireside chat, Linda Okolo-Maruti, the Business Development Support Executive at Kenya Airways. This will be followed by a 7-minute intervention by Hannah Saramo of Amazon. Geraldine, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lorraine. I think you've set the pace for what today's discussion will be about. So we will dive right into it. So glad to have Jente on the call. I know part of the conversation has been around how do we support the displaced communities, refugees transitioning to work. And this conversation today is pretty much about it. And even the discussions that I'm going to have with Jente this afternoon will be mostly around how that experience has been, right? My first questions to you will be, have you hired a refugee before? If you have, how has that experience been for you?
Hi, Geraldine. Thanks a lot for inviting me on the stand here. My name is Jente. I've been in Kenya about 10 years, where I run an IT agency. So maybe just for some context, what we do is really we develop IT solutions mostly for the European market from Kenya, where we have a team of about 25 setting. I have worked with refugees before, though I have to admit that's maybe also why I've been pulled to the stand here. It's been quite a while. We worked with refugees back in, I think, 2021 and 2022, when we actually did 2 things. First was the setup of a sort of training bootcamp, where we went to Kakuma refugee camp and then mimicked the bootcamp that we were already running in Nairobi and sort of helping them transition to the workforce, specifically IT and software development. Before that, we even ran in Brussels, where we didn't work with refugees, but we did work with quite a lot of the people from other countries, other continents coming to Brussels to learn how to basically become a developer. And that was 2016, 2017, and then transitioning into the Brussels job market. So that was around the time that I moved myself to Kenya. Maybe some things I can say about the program is that it went quite well. So we trained a group of about 50, but then getting people from there into job placements was quite challenging. I think to date, a few people have transitioned in jobs from that cohort. Some starting small businesses working within the refugee camp itself, some also becoming trainers in other IT programs that we're running there. Ourselves, we've worked with 1 person from that program out of the 50, but also wasn't easy to have a sort of long-term relationship because it was also from a remote location. Whereas what we've typically come to find is that it was quite easy when you're onboarding juniors is to have sort of an on-site location where you can work together closely, especially also because of our setting where we develop new products. So we go beyond just writing code and having someone from abroad telling us what they want written. We co-create solutions with our clients, and it's a lot of a creative process. Our clients are here in having people in a room is a very easy way to transfer context, which was difficult in this case. So that's a bit my experience. I've touched on some things high level. We can go deeper as the conversation evolves, I guess. Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jente, for sharing your experience. You mentioned about the 50 refugees that you've trained, but then the transition has been a challenge for you. And I know that cuts across the different sectors that we all work in, right? So then in the event that, you get a displaced person or a refugee person talent on your desk, what exactly are you looking out for? What skills are you looking out for? Are there any assessments you conduct? What is that process like for you?
We actually hire where are people in their careers. And so what I focus a lot on is the early days of a career. That is from graduate into employment, and then specifically from employment into senior roles, because I think that is a very important segment that even today with AI changing our whole IT industry, and there it's maybe very important that I also specify a bit where in IT that we operate, because we're software developers, but we also do product development, project management, the actual software development, and then quality assurance and support. So we do the full package. It's for us very important to always keep hiring people at the start of their careers. And so we have two ways in which we do that. One is a bit more we call them externships, where together with large groups of youth, we work together on bounty-driven models where we have open source software we develop, we source softwares, and then we give that to large groups of youth that are looking to transition into employment so that they can compete on a sort of first to solve it gets paid bounty-driven system, and while they also get support in terms of lectures on how to build sort of software architectures, those type of things. That's one of the programs we do. The second type of program we do, and that is maybe also very relevant in this case, is apprenticeships. So most of the people we hire on a 2-year apprenticeship. And tying to your question about what do you recruit for, we basically offer, we have tests that each of these apprentices need to take. And so we as an employer don't discriminate where people come from, granted that they can work on site, which is still a consideration, because again, for our juniors, we work on site to get them that context, to rub off how professionals that have been working there for 10, 15 years approach things, do things. But yeah, if we would get a candidate that comes from a displaced community and they can be in Nairobi to work with us, we would be very happy to provide them the opportunity. As part of that recruitment is a series of tests, starting with an online test where we get everyone in a room. One question, in case of if there's anyone aspiring to join us at one point, I can give for free, which I give for free on all of my speaking opportunities, is, for example, provide us with the 5 solid principles of engineering and how you've applied them in real life. So they are questions that are not, you can put them in a chatbot and get an answer, but we'll spot very quickly if these are things you haven't experienced yet, or if these are things that you are not applying in your day-to-day. So based on that, we get initial filtering. We then go into 2 project work phases, starting with a very small assignment, then a bigger assignment, and then we get into 1 or 2 final interviews, depending on how many people made the cut. A bit staggering when we do these recruitments, and we try to do 1 every quarter, so we try to hire 5 juniors every quarter, is you find that you have over 500 applicants for only 5 positions. So one of the points I did want to raise is that also when you're looking at it from the Kenyan perspective and recruiting in Kenya, it's an extremely competitive market. So there are few jobs for a very large amount of people wanting those jobs. And those large amount of people go beyond people in displaced communities, but also people that have a Kenyan nationality, have gone through the education system, so have gotten their basic education, their master's degree, often in computer science, and then still struggling to find that first opportunity. So it's an extremely competitive market in that sense. And as an employer, you have to go to get the best of the best in a way also because you're a business, you have to organize yourself competitively.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jente, for that. And I think it's very, very commendable what you're doing in terms of supporting refugees transition to work, right? But then I think it will also be important to understand, is it any different, from hiring, for instance, is it any different in terms of hiring a refugee and a Kenyan citizen? And if so,
we are currently a full Kenyan team, so we are not at the moment have any refugee employed. As I said, we worked with one quite a while ago. What I can say is when I would look at the CV, one of the things that would worry me a bit is the regulatory framework. As an employer, I'm getting a bit lost in what opportunities I can even offer to such communities and what impact hiring them would have on my organization. Does it need to go through work permits? Do you organize it through, for example, freelancing contracts like we did last time? What our best approach is there is a bit of an, I would say, undiscovered, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see, please, but we'll want to maybe open up to you later and just share about how best can we support Jente and even the other organizations represented on this call to transition as many refugees in the workspace as possible. And feedback we get from employers is that, the talent is not ready. We do not have the right infrastructure. We do not have the right systems in place. What is closer to the truth of these two?
Well, first of all, I reject the notion that talent is not readily available. I think I've mentioned already when we are recruiting, we have over 500 brilliant people that typically apply. Unfortunately, I would say the opposite is true. There are not enough opportunities. And then, of course, if there are no opportunities to get into the workforce, you also can't expect to be hiring people with experience later. There need to be those companies that are willing to also take a bet on people transitioning into the workforce. And yeah, that has always been part of our DNA in terms of the infrastructure. For us, also very important. But again, that's because we're an agency setup and we have to really be in the creative process. You could almost even compare us to a bit of a marketing agency where you have to think through a whole creative campaign and then execute it. We just do the same, but then with products. So you have to really be able to iterate, be able to brainstorm. Being able to be on site, being able to be close to us is very important. But
Absolutely.
that doesn't translate to our clients, which I also mentioned, because we're an exporting business. So we do develop products for the European market, but we do it as a team.
Thank you so much for demystifying that, which brings me to my next question, Jente. If someone today, for instance, if Fabian comes to you and says, I have a talent pool of, skilled, vetted refugees, right? What will be the thing that you will need to ensure that, you commit to hiring these young people, right? What will it be for you?
Yeah, I think, Fabien, we are looking at exploring some use cases. I think specifically it's also about how do talent pools can complement each other, because us, we're very specific about custom software development and that area. But once you have a client relationship, so once you have also shown clients Kenya is a destination that can deliver on the high-end custom software or advanced product needs that you have, you start getting a lot more demands for other things. So maybe they need to also have some marketing campaigns. Maybe they need to also have customer support or customer onboarding or those type of things. And I think if we can then develop a network amongst each other, which I'm an active, I would say, participant in and supporter of, we can get more business for all of us together. Vice versa.
Absolutely, absolutely. With all that, Elewa is doing to support refugees transition to work, right? In that space, how do you make it a business decision for you and not a social impact one? So,
well, we're always looking for talent. And so, as I mentioned, we have very competitive recruitment processes. If whoever gets on top has that background and they are at the top of our talent recruitment processes, then it's a no-brainer. Because you select for the top of the top. That way you get the best profiles.
Thank you so much. And I think we'll open this flow for a round of questions from the team and the participants on the call.
First, as having the moderator's privilege. So, Jente, I want just like the honest truth. What sort of profile do I need to provide you of a refugee for you to say, yes, I want to hire this person? What do I, as a training organization, need to do to deliver the quality of talent that you need for your organization?
Great. So first, I think soft skills are extremely key. Ability to sort of have a conversation. You find a lot, and this again was working with young people in general, that people tend to agree with everything without necessarily even really agreeing. I think having that ability to try to understand, okay, what you mentioned now, I don't necessarily understand what you're saying. Do you mean this? Can you rephrase it? Is this how you see it? So having that, being able to establish that connection with an end client, there's always more than enough work in that sector. Then being able to back that up with technical skills. And these days, technical skills can go into one of two directions. And they can go into being able to formulate a product ID and then getting that client approval, getting that client to have that buy-in. Could also go to deep technical on the other side, being able to realize those harder problems to solve. Yeah, that could be either way. So I think if you have profiles that match the description, then we have more than enough work.
So we have one question from Brenda. So with the one refugee that you hired, what was the Kenyan team's perception, attitude towards them or him or her, right? And was there any support that you needed for the talent to fit in quote well, or that was not an issue?
Okay, so we only worked on freelancing basis, and the other advantages we have was our team went there to actually go and train. So there was already a sort of relationship between the two parties. Because it was on a sort of few gigs basis, the scope was always clear, and in that sense, well delivered.
One is refugees face challenges in getting jobs due to documentation. What have you done to bridge that gap? And the second question is, what are the key skills gap you have experienced within the refugee context or cohort?
We understand that refugees face challenges in getting jobs due to documentation, but as an employer, I can't have that responsibility shifted to me to solve that problem. And so when you get to the top of the list, we have background checks to show, do you have the ability to work here? And then we would need an answer on that, about that question. There are so many young people that are looking for opportunities, and you don't have to go to the displaced communities for that. They are right in Nairobi already themselves. And so it's a very difficult question to then ask me to sort of go the extra mile, whereas I already can offer an opportunity to so many other people.
Yes, so we have one last question from Ray. He asks, for refugees in Kenya to receive a work permit, employers must complete Form 25, right? So the details of which demonstrate that refugees, even if born in Kenya, are subject to labor markets tests which require employers to confirm that no Kenyan citizen possesses these skills for which a refugee is hired. Refugees seem to be treated like foreign nationals brought in Kenya through multinational employee transfer or sponsored by Kenyan or foreign companies, hiring highly skilled migrants with tertiary education for positions requiring specialized skill sets. How have you hired a refugee through this process, and how long did it take?
We mostly worked on gig basis up to this point, so I have no experience with this. But thanks a lot for sharing that information. I think one of the things that I would encourage organizations working with refugees and displaced communities, when they would come to me as an employer, make that very clear to me, that this is the process that is supposed to be followed, and that this is the type of paperwork that needs to be produced. I think that will help bridge that gap, because this is information that we typically don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. And maybe one last question for you, Jente, is that I loved what Jente said about there is plenty of talent, but opportunities are the issue, right? So this is something we have seen for a few years now, right? But what are the solutions to this? What can we do? What is Jente doing?
That's my type of question. So that's exactly what I am focused on a day-to-day basis. But from a different perspective, of course, I'm doing that from the Kenyan market and not necessarily from the refugee market. We formed a bridge between Kenya specifically and the European market, specifically in IT solutions. And we do that in a few ways. Typically, when you look at the IT outsourcing market, the market is very much driven by trying to sell time and CVs specifically. So they will tell you, their clients, you have issues finding talent. Here are a bunch of CVs with talent that I managed to find. Will you please hire them? And so when you bring that to a European employer, for example, they will say, I do not know Kenya, or in this case, for example, what markets you are proposing as really an IT destination. I've heard about India, I've heard about the Philippines, but I never thought Kenya could actually has these type of resources and has well-trained type of resources. And so you're going against the narrative, because Kenya is not specifically known as a country where you can get extremely good IT people, even though reality says it is and shows it is. So how do you bridge that? You bridge that by going deeper than the problem of talent. Talent itself, yes, you need talent, but why do you need talent? You need talent because you have problems to solve. And so what we do is we go into that problem solution layer. We try to understand what is it you're trying to build. Can we co-create a solution with you for this problem? How we do that specifically, typically I work for people with 10, 15, 20 years of experience in a certain niche that want to start a startup. So they know all of this information. Maybe they've been, for example, in event management, and they see a room for innovation, but they are business people or operations people. They are not technical people. And so we partner with them, try to understand their vision, and then take the work of visualizing that into a product. Is this how you see it? Is this what you wanted to build? And then we give them a quotation that is not just the product, it's not just the people, but it will cost you this much to actually build that product. So typically we give them a fixed scope project implementation, 20 to 100,000 euros to get your startup into the market. We help them get financing because they're startups. So we introduce them to our subsidy network. This is a European activity. And then we guide them through getting the first client. How do you build your customer onboarding? And so we focus on what value can we add and how do we solve the problem, rather than where are we finding the talents. to solve that problem. You trust me solving the problem, I will solve it. That I'm based in Kenya and that I work with partly training, but also finding exceptional people there. Please don't worry about that. You worry about your own business. If you focus on the problem and the value proposition and have the people as a secondary value proposition, but not the main thing, you're creating your own competitive niche, and you do something else than everyone else is doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I couldn't close this session as well as you have done, Jente. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, particularly around the displaced, hiring the displaced communities. So thank you so much for that. I think Mark, Lorraine, and Brenda will be sharing a document where we can then ask our questions and then. So thank you so much, Jente.
Thank you, Jente. And I'm coming to you, Jente, because we have a lot of work we can do together. We have the talent you need. I'm promising you. So what a fantastic discussion. Really, thank you for your honesty and your openness. And Geraldine, amazing questions. Our next guest is Linda from Kenya Airways. Again, Kenya Airways is an organization that we all know very well. So we're really interested to hear what Linda's take is this. So Geraldine and Linda, over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Linda, it's such a pleasure and our honor to have you on this call. Linda, please introduce yourself. Tell us what Kenya Airways does, particularly in hiring refugees. So over to you.
All right. So yes, my name, as you've heard, is Linda Okolo-Maruti, and yes, I've worked in Kenya Airways for this will be my 11th year. I have championed diversity initiatives for the past 4 years, and I guess that's why I'm here today. Before I joined Kenya Airways, I worked for Churchill Service, and particularly we were working with refugee resettlement. So I did meet refugees in a different setup before now. So, I mean, it was this morning I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking it's coming full circle. I started with them when they were looking for opportunities to go to another country. And now I'm looking into ways, how do we manage to have them in our country as a second country of settlement, perhaps, or a second country that gives them an opportunity which they couldn't have in their country. So at Kenya Airways, we value dignity. So we approach the journey of being inclusive with that in mind. So whatever way we are handling this, we actually ensure that we are not leaving anyone behind. The reason I'm here is because the gap exists, and the gap exists for various reasons. Perhaps we've just not intentionally given it a focus. And again, you know, after we came from COVID, there was the headcount thing. People are checking out, is our headcount right, and things like that. And so bringing extra people on board takes a little bit of push, which I have been doing successfully. And I've done that with persons with disability. And I've also begun to see how do we then bring in minorities, and that's where refugees fall in. So pretty excited to be here. I'm here to see how do we overcome the gap that seems to exist. And yes, looking forward to the discussion that we're going to be having.
Thank you so much, Linda. So Kenya Airways, being one of the biggest corporates here in Kenya, has displaced persons ever come up in your hiring conversations? And if so, what was that like?
So we've touched on it, address. So we work globally. We have staff across, and occasionally we get to send our staff across to other countries, and the paperwork becomes a big one because naturalizing paper so that they fit at a given context has been a challenge. Those are some of the things that I see that would probably have kept us slow-footed on this angle, because you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, we want to get them in, but we have foreign people who previously the government has not given work permits. And so we are wondering, how does this fit in with the refugees? So there's that. And the other thing is, of course, the fact that we are not sure about culture fit. Will they fit into our culture in terms of language, in terms of all those other barriers that might be there? And of course, we insist on background checks. I don't know how that will be done in the case of a refugee. So really, those are some of the challenges that we tend to see. And of course, we hire on merit. We give everybody a chance, but we've not intentionally said, okay, now are you a refugee? You know, have we come to that community and actually seen how are we bringing that community into our setup? So yes, a gap exists and we hope we can fill it in the coming days.
Yeah, so I like that you've mentioned about how Kenya Airways hires on merit, right? You're already having discussions around how better can we support the refugees transition to the workplace, right? So with Kenya Airways hiring around maybe in thousands, right? How then is that process for you? You know, you're a big corporate, you're a major employer within the sector, the region. So what is that process, hiring process like for an corporation or organization such as yourself?
As costs.
Yeah.
And so every hiring follows that process. And I imagine that's pretty much for everyone. But for us, because we are listed, a lot of scrutiny and everything, we have to give justification as to why. So the conversation to have refugees come in has been, we've had once or twice. I've actually reached out to a few organizations to see, how do you guys do this? Do we have our entry point usually would be internships. And we've seen internships work well. And so that would be an area that we would be willing to explore. I mean, how do you get refugees into internships? What do you need? And things like that. And then, of course, remember that our industry is highly, highly regulated in terms of what are your requirements. A few times we brought people in the trying to be inclusive, and then they get to KCAA, and KCAA has their own standards. And those standards we have to meet, and therefore we have a challenge right there. I'm also just wondering, what is the tenure of a refugee like? Would it be long-term? Would it be contractual? So all those things have to be put into place for us to actually fully understand what this is all about. But as I've mentioned, our big hesitation has been the fact that it's something we've not done, and we have not intentionally wanted to do it because we are thinking, okay, when we get into it, will we be good at it? Who's doing it right? And part of the reason I'm here is to meet people who are doing it right, so that I can then be able to see how are we going to translate this so that it can work for us as well. But of course, the highlighted challenges notwithstanding, I think it's something that perhaps is worth trying. But then again, that's something that we've not done, and it's to be tested and seen. But yes, those are some of the opportunities I'm seeing with our kind of organization. The fact that they come from that culture, and they would probably help us to understand the culture better. And I also think just having them in our space then enhances the kind of innovations we can get into, the kind of places we can be that we haven't been, because they're coming in with knowledge that we probably don't have from a different country and things like that. So yeah, an opportunity that needs to be exploited. It's the how that seems to be the big gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that there's that intentionality. We're having that discussion around how best can we also support Kenya Airways implement, the ideas around how do we transition more refugees into the workplace, right? And what I'm hearing also from you is an internship program will be a low-hanging fruit for us, right? To transition these young people to work. So what will that look like? What requirements would we need? Partners on the call, I know such collaboration. So then if we're talking about internship, what would we need to make sure that, we get these refugees in work?
I probably need to see how that is operationalized, Would of course first need to check, do we have a head count that then gives us that space to bring, and how many are we bringing in? That would be one. And then what are the legal requirements so that we are not caught up in you've done so much and then you can't get the person in. So the legal requirements. And then, of course, the merit. So they've gone to school in their country of origin. How are we translating that qualification into our qualifications, which our security team is very, very strict on? I mean, even Kenyans do get a problem when their transcripts cannot be verified, when their qualifications cannot be verified. So how do we verify that this particular qualification translates into this in our context? And then just also looking at what's the entry point? Is it the graduate? Is it the cadet? How are we doing this? In what stream are we taking? Are we taking the IT? Are we taking the operations? Are we taking them as crew? Because I think, as I said, an opportunity in crew, especially some of the communities are very beautiful. And, for crew, you need beautiful and handsome young people. But then again, I'm also alive to the fact that refugees are not necessarily only youth. what happens to the rest of the community that's not necessarily youth? How are we looking at having those also just become part of this equation?
Thank you so much, Linda, for that. And even as we talk about refugee candidates and also just transitioning refugees to work, what assumptions currently exist? How do we validate or invalidate such assumptions?
Of course, the only way to validate is to try. You only know when you've tried and failed, isn't it? Taking the bold step to actually try and see if it works. And then maybe an internship would cushion in terms of the headcount challenge, because it would then mean it's a trial and we are safe. We are safe because there's no quote unquote long-term commitment. And we've explored things like MasterCard, working with them. So I don't know if that would be available for the refugee as well, because if it is, then that becomes a motivator. If someone says that there's no budget, then I can always say, but we've got these partners who are ready to work with us in this manner. The big gap being it's not been tried, and therefore we have a lot of assumptions of the risks that are involved. And the only way to go around it is to start it.
I agree, Linda. But then what will it take for Kenya Airways to make a commitment towards, hiring refugees? What can we do to make sure we support refugees transition to work?
We would need guidance on what are the legal requirements with the government. I just heard someone mention that we need this Form 25. Maybe having a look at Form 25, what does it look like? In our context, how does that fit in with us? Knowing, okay, so this is what the legal requirement is. And then this is how their qualifications look like. And this is what we will translate them into our context. And then, of course, having somebody who's already done it, tell us this is what works, this is what will not work. And therefore, so that when you're coming in, we are confident because we have this person who is doing it, it's working for them. I'm looking at options like does MasterCard or other people who would probably assist with the stipend so that it's not fully a burden for Kenya Airways at this point. Are they out there? Are they willing to also embrace the refugee community? And I think it's something that needs to happen because the population, I know, especially for young professionals in the refugee community, is growing because Africa, as you know, is quite affected a lot by conflicts and displacements. And therefore, the numbers keep growing, I would almost say hourly, if not monthly. So the need is huge and opportunity. And yes, we might say they're waiting to go to a third country of settlement, but we are also seeing that line now becoming more and more, it's not as clear as before. Before we would know you'd come here within this time, you can travel. But now, because of the recent changes in the global setup, we see that that's not possible. So then what do we as Africans do to be part of the solutions to the problem that we are seeing? And for me, I'm just thinking that we need people who've done it, help us to be sure-footed in the journey so that we are able to take it. And then, of course, as I've said, unless we try, we cannot be sure whether it will work or not.
Absolutely, Linda. I like that. We need people who've done it. And I know within our participants, we have partners who've actually implemented this previously or are currently implementing this. So I know some of us will be reaching out to you as a follow-up because, again, we're all passionate about supporting and transitioning refugees to work, right? So then this is a conversation that will go beyond this call. We'll want to create an ecosystem where then we are able to document our learnings, best practices. Having the DRS on the call and amongst ourselves, I think will be a step closer to us achieving our goals in terms of supporting refugees transition to work. So thank you so much, Linda, for sharing.
Maybe just to mention, I know that we look at work as the ultimate, if you like. But I think also just exploring supply chains, what's the opportunity there? Are there things that we probably currently are procuring from someone else, and probably we would procure from refugee community if we are guided on how that process looks like? We have an innovation hub that is big on upcycling. So we have stuff that we get from the aircraft that needs upcycling. And oftentimes we go to the communities to look who in the community can help us upcycle our quote unquote waste, whatever we get from the aircraft. Would that be the refugee community perhaps? Are they there? Are they doing it? So a bit of more visibility in terms of that angle as well, because employment is great, but the truth is that employment will not solve the problem entirely. So even as we look at corporates hiring, we also need to now look at supply chains and other channels that corporates can still support the work that refugees do and then support their livelihood, perhaps in a way that does not necessarily cost them too much. If supply chain might work, they could be good at upcycling and things like that. So just also giving that an eye, apart from just the mainstream employment, I think is a good way to go. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing with us. The first is on the internships, right? So are the internships paid?
Yeah, any internship would pay. It's just that the stipend becomes more decent if you have partnership, so that you're able to beef it up. But yes, all internships are paid.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the second question is, has any stakeholder from the displaced context approached you to work on this so far?
I have had a few discussions with Amahoro, a coalition. We haven't gotten anything solid, but we have definitely had the conversation and gotten involved in one way or another.
Why haven't we been able to move forward, and what has blocked the progress?
I really, maybe, as I said, there has not been like intention, we are doing this, we're running. We've touched it a few, and to be honest, even this year, I was reaching out to just see do they have internships? How does that work? Do they have a partner who works with them? At least I know I've done that initial check, but yeah, the intention and maybe more focus is what we haven't quite done, but we have touched on it, yes.
So then I think, Linda, in regards to that, you and so that we have a concept on how best we can execute this, right? Because we still have these conversations going on so that we have a very clear action plan and just very clear commitments on how best to support refugees get work. And another question for you, Linda, is for refugees who've completed their education in Kenya, including tertiary education, does this generally translate into job readiness for employers, such as Kenya Airways? So beyond the work permit, legal institution, and practical barriers, continue to limit the employment opportunities?
We are inclusive in our hiring policy. So it means merit is what guides who comes in. That's the first line. I mean, we've advertised for a job. You think you can do the job, go ahead and apply. Especially now because in our policy framework for employees, we have inclusion as a factor. Just go ahead and apply. So I think the first thing is for all of us, both Kenya Airways and the refugee community, to go ahead and give a test. There's a job that has been advertised, apply for it. And if there's pushback because you are a refugee, let's also have that conversation and see what made this person not come in. They have the merit. So why did we not take them in? And we are saying that we're inclusive. So in that regard, I think the ball is in both courts. Somebody who's a refugee makes an application. Are you saying just because we see you are a refugee, we are not giving you a chance? No. So that becomes a litmus test for both of us. Is there a job application advert out there? Has a person who is a refugee applied? Have we said no? So that also needs to be checked. And if it has been so, what made us say no? So perhaps for me, that's homework. I need to check with my HR colleagues, team, has this happened and why and what was the difficulty? And therefore, how do you overcome it so that in future or the near foreseeable future, any refugee applicant who does apply gets a job? And perhaps also we run an academy. So if any refugee applicant is able to attend our academy, that gives them a high chance of working in our operations, of working as crew. I mean, we have an academy that runs Crew, I think, is 6 months. Others are 3 months. So they just join the academy like everybody else, get the study and all that. But of course, maybe working with partners, those are possibilities that I am looking at to join us. Because you see, as said, we are highly regulated. So our work is a bit niches, if you like. So you would not just come, you need some training, some basic training as an entry. So we have an academy offering the courses that will then give you an opportunity to go in. Because you see, we are looking at this long term. This is your second country of settlement, but what if you're going to a third one? If you have an aviation skill, that's an edge, because there are not many aviation skilled refugees. We are IATA certified and ICAO certified. Then you already have an edge there. So that's also an opportunity to look at in terms of the young professionals. Now, where the professionals come, let them apply for any job they see. We post our jobs on LinkedIn, and then from there, we will pick it and see whether we said no because we're a refugee, or why did we say no.
Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing your insight. Thank you so much, Linda, for that. Lorraine, over to you.
So first of all, thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much, Jente. Geraldine, thank you so much. Really amazing discussion. Linda, you said you want to hear people who've done it. So we have an answer to your question. So next we'll have a 7-minute intervention from Hannah Saramo, Enterprise Account Executive at Amazon Web Services, who's hired refugees. So Hannah, over to you. I'm really excited to hear this.
Everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me for today. So I have indeed, alongside my sales role, built from the ground up a refugee employment program for Amazon. So very excited to speak about that today. To me, where this all started was when I was really just leading an organization's EU technical operations team, where we faced a business problem which were facing rapid increase in demand as our technical roadmap was growing from 16 to 70 plus tasks. We repeatedly discovered an issue with quality assurance, and even after all the efforts, we had been able to get this up by 20%. However, I saw that there was a bit more opportunity there, but we would need to do more skill-based matching. So our technical team was trained for really building automations, and they were really struggling in particularly with creating creative tasks. I then heard of a refugee team that had done amazing results in accuracy improvement in the US through an AWS crowdsourcing marketplace tool called Amazon Mechanical Turk. The agency Okolo-Maruti, whose founder Giselle is also here today, which help businesses mapping this type of talent teams. I found this was a win-win. So we were making both business and social impact at the same time. And it was an incredibly ambiguous project to launch. I'm not going to lie that it was easy. It included creating multiple strategy docs to gain approvals from leaders in different functions and departments, including finance, social impact, PR, business operations, and public policy, as well as getting funding approved from scratch with no existing program or precedent in Amazon, in particular Europe or the UK. So just to get approvals took about 1 year, and then actually getting the hires onboarded for the first time, it took several months. So all of this was without any full-time headcount from the business. So it required time aside my actual core role and building a team of volunteers to support me. People were quite eager and mission-driven. I guess part of the Amazon culture as we have. But I would say, I think what kept me going was the genuine drive in believing that this was the right thing to do. There were honestly so many challenges on the road ahead that at any point I could have just heard that all of this work has been for nothing. And I do want to thank our partners at Okolo-Maruti and suppliers at 10 for being such an amazing support network. These partnerships are vital, in particular when there is no allocated headcount. So we are now over a year since launching our first cohort in March 2025, after starting this entire project in 2023. And these are some of the results we have seen today. So we have 100% contract extension rate. And this was not an easy feat during a time when the world seems to be making cuts around social impact work. And in parallel, our company's largest layoffs in the history. We had also a member outperforming our UK benchmark by 42% and EU by 16%, managing a $39 million portfolio while bringing in 100% customer satisfaction scores. We had a designer whose work drove 400% year-over-year revenue increase. We had members passing AWS certifications, delivering training to others in their teams, and recognized as data champions, which is a highly valued and incredibly difficult certification to gain. Emphasize, in addition to just getting refugees in, I think we need to think how we are also setting them up to succeed and collect these data points. What I think was a key in succeeding here, this program integrated into business teams. So we were solving real customer and business problems and not portraying it as a charity project at any point. It had been our program tenant from day one, really, that the best way to help our candidates is to help the business. This has resulted in now having data points, which I just mentioned, to speak for their business value, and no one really benefits from being perceived as the diversity hire. At least speaking from as a woman in business and in tech, that's my experience. I named the program as Digital Work Program intentionally to avoid it sounding like refugee charity support, when in reality these people provide real work with high standards and really adding value to the business and for the society they're building their futures in. So what I would like to see businesses do on a leadership level is to make it truly work and enable this value-based model by integrating into their business strategy. So not treating it as a separate, isolated CSR project led by people whose daily work might actually be closer to your customers. So empower your employees to be leaders, whatever their role are. If they hold any decision power, like I was when I was leading the technical operations team as a stretch project, then they should be able to input and be even expected to think about and consider their social impact. This is especially true when we work at a large company where bureaucracy often increases the same time as the need for this type of thinking. And one thing Amazon has done well has been incorporating a leadership principle called success and scale brings forth responsibility into the company culture. So find where you can fit things into your company culture, which can really help driving your leadership approvals. That's something that I found incredibly valuable in this process. The other thing is that this type of work should be valued and considered in somebody's performance evaluations. So this person is hitting their sales target and multiplying their business impact, which is improving our company's social impact overall. If that's the case, then I would say when that isn't seen, we end up just burning out the people who are the most driven and who look for the success holistic, think big view, which is also a leadership principle at Amazon. But if you think about it, do we really just want contributors who only focus on their own numbers without a reflection of the company brand as a whole, for instance? So someone asked in this meeting which skills would be helpful for businesses, and my answer to that is that a large company hiring being shifting into more proof-based, skill-based hiring with AI skills showing samples. So if you have a project you've built on with AI, this is really impactful in today's market. We have, for instance, been training our graphic designers through this program in AI to ensure we are future-proofing the relevancy of their current skill set. And showing adjustability, in my opinion, is just the perfect story for a candidate in today's job market for any, future opportunities in Amazon or elsewhere. And yeah, for anyone hesitating moving ahead with this, I totally recommend getting involved with our partner network, who I am sure have many business success stories to tell. And also, my advice is don't try to do this alone. Take all the learnings from others, which they have been through. Knowing ahead the payments, for instance, would be difficult. But for me, it truly helped us model the entire implementation to remove this barrier before we even got started. So do reach out, and I am happy to get you in touch with our partner, EcoReach, who have been truly behind the scenes blessing for us. So, yeah, and of course, happy to share more in detail any learnings I encountered along this now a 3-year project. So please do feel free to reach out. And I would say one more thing is the remaining challenge we have with expanding to remote locations, especially is the company's return to office policy, which is not in my power to change, unfortunately. So if anyone has a way to overcome this, I would really love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Incredible. Hannah, you said so many things. And what really struck me is how we want to integrate the refugee inclusion into the business case and not a charity. We're building real customer and business, and business cases for the inclusion of refugees. Hugely important. Yeah. So thank you, Hannah. And I'm sure you'll have lots of people reaching out to you on LinkedIn after this. So thank you. Really appreciate you being so honest and sharing your experience with us today.
Thank you.
So as we close, I want to thank everyone again, Jente, Linda, Hannah, and Geraldine, for your honesty. We don't often have honest conversations from employers. We often have window dressed. We often have people talking in narratives which only try to window dress the challenges. So thank you for your honesty. This is really what we wanted to hear today. So we learned a lot. We learned that should documentation be the responsibility of the employer, we need to prove that refugees have skills that Kenyans don't have to get work permits. How do we overcome these challenges? Refugees need to have the right skills. They need soft skills, they need technical skills. And the reality is many Kenyans have these skills in education as well as refugees. So we have a huge hurdle to overcome. Thank you, Jente, for saying that, because we often challenge employers, why aren't you hiring refugees? But the reality is, loosely, we're in Kenya. It's easy to hire a Kenyan. They have the skills, they have the experience, have the qualification, they can come start with immediately. It's an extra step to hire a refugee. So we have to find a way to make it seamless. So eventually, there is no legal difference to hire either of the two. I think that's what we're trying to aim toward. Hannah, you also, as well as integration being the business case, you also spoke about AI proofing and AI training and future proofing, hugely important. And I feel that's one thing that we often forget. We often think training ends when our donor money finishes, but that's only the start. We have to ensure that the people we train are continuously upskilled, implementing in them the continuous learning attitude, or that perhaps that's us providing some sort of alumni support. So thank you all. Really great questions. So before we end, I want to give us 40 seconds. A poll will pop up, some advice and feedback from you. I heard today that advice is better than feedback. So even though it comes across as feedback, give us advice on how we can improve. Tell us what we need to do better. So the first question is, what's one thing you will do after the session? Tell us. Tomorrow is our final session. The work mismatch, skilling refugees for the right jobs. It reflects on the past 2 days and steps back to examine what happens before placement, whether skilling programs are preparing refugees for the work that actually exists. If you haven't registered, the link is in the chat. So thank you everyone today for this fantastic, open and honest discussion, and we'll see you tomorrow for the final day.